Hello over there and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, to this special coverage of Russia-Ukraine conflict. Yesterday, President Vladimir Putin marked Russia's Victory Day by insisting that Russian forces in Ukraine were fighting for the motherland, but he made no major announcements in his speech. UK intelligence said that Russia will make this parade as a date to relaunch its military operation all over Ukraine again, but so far they were wrong. US President Joe Biden, on the other hand, said that he was worried that Mr. Putin did not have a way out of the war. He said that Mr. Putin had mistakenly believed the war would break up NATO and the EU, and this morning several missiles struck the southern city of Odessa, hitting a shopping center and a warehouse, local officials says. Outside the battlefield, Ukraine began the process of applying to join the EU in February this year, 4 days after Russia's invasion. But so far, nothing has been approved, and the re-elected French President Macron said, "We all know perfectly well that the process to allow Ukraine to join would take several years, indeed, probably several decades." To this point, several questions come to the scene. Why US and UK are looking to aid Ukraine with weapons and not only a diplomacy solution, and how Russia will face the sanctions impact with the coronavirus high number detection daily, and will Ukraine survive another month of battling against the Russians? To answer these questions, we have the Ukrainian political science expert Kirill Molchanov, based on Germany, and the journalist John Phoenix, an international relations expert from England. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us in this debate. The discussion begins right after this break. And before we delve into our debate, Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov has arrived in Algiers for an official visit at the invitation of his Algerian counterpart, Ramtan Lamamra. Russian top diplomat Lavrov headed to Algeria Martyr Memorial to lay a wreath of flowers in memory of the Algerian Revolution martyrs. This visit focused on overall review of the state and prospects of bilateral relations and the broad exchange of views on major regional and international issues, such as those relating to situation in the Sahel, Libya, Syria, and the Western Sahara. This visit aimed at strengthening cooperation between the two countries in several sectors of activity, which are described as distinguished and historic relations between Algeria and Russia, whose friendship dates back several decades. Mr. Kirill, I will start with you. Almost a month ago, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has paid a visit to Algeria, and now the Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov is here in Algeria as well. So how can you read this visit? Was it expected, or this visit to give an answer for the Arab League initiative to mediate between Russia and Ukraine?
I don't think that the visit of Lavrov in Algeria depends on Ukrainian war problems or negotiation about the Ukraine. I think it's only will be a discussion about economical situation, because I know that Algeria may be on the third place in Europe, that the country export natural gas to European Union. So we know that last month there's a detailed discussion in Brussels by all countries of the European Union to don't buy Russian gas. So I think that Lavrov would like to have some maybe dialogue with Algeria politics, Algeria diplomats, to have some maybe solution about the price political about the gas, because if Europeans don't buy Russian gas, maybe the price of it will be degrees, and it will cost more than $1,000 or $2,000. So maybe it's like an analog of oil OPEC, maybe some gas club of countries that have sold the gas to all about the world. I think it will be the top theme of this visit.
Quite understood. Mr. John, the Arab world is also seeking peace in Ukraine. In early April, the Arab League said it was ready to contribute to a peaceful resolution between Russia and Ukraine. So, do you think this visit by Lavrov is an answer to the call peaceful resolution, or it was expected after the U.S. Secretary Blinken's visit last month?
Well, I believe that the initiative by the Arab League, which is, I believe, is not going to be that successful due to the position of the Arabs in Syria. Obviously, the Arabs had a problem with the Russian support of the government of Syria. So it's going to be difficult, obviously, project where the Arab can mediate between Russia and Ukraine. And that's why the Russians choose to visit Algeria due to the background and the historical relationship between Russia and Algeria. They don't visit Kuwait or Qatar, because I don't think the Russians will see the Arab regimes as impartial to the situation. We all know that the Arab regime is a puppet of the United States, and obviously their position on that situation with Syria, it was actually pro-American, anti-Russian, anti-Assad. Hope obviously come more from Turkey, because Turkey relationship with Russia is more closer to the Russian government than obviously the Ukrainians. So I don't think this project will be successful in any way. I believe that the Russians accept dealing with the Algerians just due to the Algerian, obviously, political position and historical position with the Soviet Union at that time.
Perfectly understood. Mr. Kirill, I'm coming back to you. How can you read Putin's speech yesterday? He said that this year's parade represents another victory for our nation and our ancestors, in other words, USSR. In your analysis, is he looking to bring back the Soviet Union, or this is just words of celebration?
I remember the Putin's visit to Munich conference in 2007 year, and he says that it is a great mistake for him, for his country, that the Soviet Union was crashed. So maybe in his opinion, yes, he wants to finish his president terms in Russian Federation, like political, that can have the USSR 2.0. Yes, but this idea is not popular not only in Ukraine, but also not popular in other countries of ex-USSR like Georgia, Moldova, in Asia countries. So maybe he can nowadays he have opportunity to build this new or simulacral regime only with Russian and Belarusian maybe territory, and so nowadays I think it seems fantastic. Maybe in future, but not maybe not this year or in the middle future.
Understood. Mr. John, Russia's picture has changed in the whole world and precisely in Europe. So, as an international expert, how can you consider this military operation so far? And what is the next step Putin may take?
Well, don't forget, just going back to your guest, Russia doesn't need to take Ukraine. Russia never seek to take Ukraine. There is a dispute, obviously, within the Russian political elite regard to what's happening. The Ukrainians, actually, if you look back to the beginning of the process, they have signed an agreement in Minsk in regard to Donbass. Sadly, the Western biased media never mentioned 8 years of the killing of the civilians in Donbass by the neo-Nazis in Ukraine, which led to the Russian limited operation in Ukraine. Russia is not really seek to conquer Ukraine. Russia has been sitting and watching their media and now talk about why Russia did not take Kiev. The first resistance by the army, Russia bombed the military bases. Russia bombed the food, which is supplied the military and water. They're just sitting and watching. I don't think Russia ever wanted to occupy Ukraine, to revive the Soviet Union. Don't forget, years ago, Putin actually asked to join NATO as a member. But the problem is with the collapsed Soviet Union and the crisis which is imperialists now facing, economic crisis, they tried to expand, obviously bordering Soviet Union. They wanted, as you see now, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, they all joined as member of NATO. They tried to put Russia on a corner, which is actually, this is not what Russia will accept. So it was a talk about that between the Russians and the Americans regard to Ukraine, and they promised during the time of Gorbachev they will not actually move, close to the ex-Soviet Union. But what we've seen now, they've seen Russians building military bases in Lithuania, as I said, and Estonia, Latvia, in order to control the scene on Russia, and that any country will not accept that at all. And that's what's actually don't forget Minsk agreement, which is called for ceasefire between the Ukrainians and the people of Donbass, being actually violated according to the NATO mission, who actually was observing the ceasefire. So that's forced Russia to take action in order to save the Russian-speaking minority in Ukraine. That's what we had to go back to the roots of the conflict, not to actually follow up what the Western kitchen, cook for us from the propaganda that Putin want to reconquer Ukraine. That's what I think.
Quite understood. Now, Oris, moving on, the re-elected French President Emmanuel Macron declared Monday in Strasbourg that to end the war in Ukraine army, peace will have to be built without humiliating Russia. Let's have a listen.
Tomorrow we will have peace to build. Let's never forget that. We will have to do this with Ukraine and Russia around the table. The terms of discussion and negotiations will be determined by Ukraine and Russia, but this will not be done in denial, nor in exertion of one another, nor even in humiliation.
Mr. Kirill, the French President Macron stopped his calling for negotiations with Putin because he didn't reach any solution. Now, after he was re-elected, he is in power. He's calling back for Russia with a different way. That appears he stands with Moscow so far to some extent. What are you saying about this?
I think that Macron, after he re-elected, like you say, he wants to have the first role in Ukraine, like in Europe, like politics that will force the negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. So we see that he has a concord with Erdogan for this mission, because Erdogan also wants to have some ceasefire documents to write in Istanbul. But I think because a few weeks ago I was in Ukraine, if you see the situation on ground, maybe every position of Russia and Ukraine nowadays don't force that some ceasefire agreements. So maybe the situation will be finished on the war field, yes, between Ukrainian and Russian military forces, and nowadays even Macron wants some negotiations. I don't think that it will have some positive dynamics because the situation is not have a decision some ceasefire agreement.
Quite understood. Mr. John, as a British, don't you think that there is a sort of two-faced challenge between the NATO leaders and, in other words, some of them are trying to escalate the war, such as UK and Germany, and on the other hand, France and Turkey are looking forward to bring the peaceful resolution close to the table. What are you saying about this?
I think Macron was the first to understand that there is no way out on the crisis. Russia, at the beginning of the war, with the Americans and European Union embargoes and obviously economic embargo on Russia, they thought that will work. Obviously, they understood it's failing, and there's no way out of the situation. Macron understands that the economic crisis which is Europe going through is really severe. As you see now in UK, the gallon of gas is nearly two pounds. You know, I never seen a policy where you impose embargo in a country where you shoot yourself in the foot. We're having crisis actually more than Russia here. You know, that is one thing Macron understood. Second thing is that the issue on Ukraine is no reverse on that. The only way out of the crisis is to truly negotiate between I guess, the Americans and the Russians, because the regime in Ukraine is obviously puppet to the West. I don't think he will be trusted to achieve any negotiation. So there have to be two big power players, which is the Americans and the Russians. In regard to UK, we are always a tail of the American imperialists. You know, we have to follow suit, as you see on the war against Iraq. We are just the puppet of the United States. So the problem is, I don't think nobody even taking notice of UK position, because we always take a side of the United States. We are suffering also from economic crisis in regard to food prices, oil, gas, and name it. So obviously, it's not strange that UK will support the United States against Russia.
Quite understood. Mr. Kirill, preparing for the invasion, Russian president said that this military operation was really important and necessary to defend our national security. And Ben Wallace, the UK Defense Ministry, is saying that Russia should share the same fate as the Nazis, who ended up facing the Nuremberg trials for atrocities. Based on these points, which side is being Nazis? Is it Russia or Ukraine?
Oh, I think it depends on definition of Nazism, because every side maybe have some different opinions about this definition. And about yesterday words of Putin in Moscow, he says that the Russia needed to start an invasion because Ukraine maybe in few weeks or months will at first invade the south part of Ukraine, and Ukrainian military forces will also go into Crimea. So I think it's not. It is the position of Putin to have some to have objective maybe words for his society, because in Ukraine every people know that from Ukrainian politicals or from Ukrainian maybe military forces, there are any words that Ukraine will be with soldiers, troops have victory on Ukrainian territory that was occupied in 2014 years. So I think it's only a political demagogic position of Putin that he told maybe for all the time that war is going. So it's not a new position. It's we see all this, we hear all these words from Putin from 21st February this year.
Understood. Now moving on to another point, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he expects Ukraine to obtain candidate status for the European Union in June. The president also mentioned the Russian strikes on Odessa in a video address. Let's have a listen.
We hope to receive a positive response regarding the acquisition of our country's EU candidate status in June. Despite the presence of the President of the European Council, Russian troops have launched a missile attack on the Odessa region again. This is Russia's true attitude towards Europe, and it has always been so, despite what is said in Moscow.
Mr. John, how can you consider this contradiction? EU is trying to help Ukraine at the same time that are refusing Ukraine to be joined. This refusal based on what? Are they afraid from Russia, or Ukraine will bring more problems to this union?
Well, I don't think the issue of they're afraid of Russia, the issue that Ukraine is still not qualified to join the European Union. Because it's going back to your previous question in regard to which the Nazi side, from the time where they had the Maidan, we've seen who was in charge. We've seen this militant with the Nazi emblem in their shirts. We know that according to the CIA, also that's a report from Washington, that the Americans themselves training such Nazi groups. The regime itself is a dictator regime who actually arrested lots of journalists. To join the European Union, you have to fill in a certain condition, which is Ukraine as a corrupt regime, known economically and militarily corrupt regime, controlled by the fascist police state, will not actually fill the condition to join the European Union. They may do it in the future, that to do with a lot of changes. Number one, get rid of all these Nazis who actually control the establishment, and have a civil society, civilized regime where we're willing to work with the international community. That's obviously difficult to achieve at this time.
Understood. Mr. Kirill, French President Emmanuel Macron, the EU leader, said that it will take decades for Ukraine to be accepted into the European Union. Based on these statements, why it is so hard for Ukraine to be an EU member before this war and even now?
Yes, in his yesterday's speech, Macron says that Ukraine can join the European Union this process will be for years or decades. So it also maybe is a message to Ukrainian political establishment that this will be very far away, and it will not be maybe in few months like it wants Zelensky. If I remember, the status of candidate to European Union, Turkish have from 1998 year. So it is not a guarantee that Ukraine will be join European Union at all. So I think it's like maybe first step, and we don't see when this process will be finished. Plus, even the war stops, we have almost knockout economic situation in Ukraine. We have bombed infrastructure. We have 5 million Ukrainian citizens, refugees, in both of them in the European Union. So I don't think that in this situation all European countries would like to see Ukraine in union. So we hear the position of not only Macron, we hear also position of Hungary, position of Austria. So there's no there are many different voices in European Union. So I think it's really takes maybe decades if it will be at least everywhere.
Quite understood. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden signed a law on Monday to speed up the shipments of military equipment to Ukraine, reactivating a device dating from the Second World War. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saw in the signature a historic step.
Provides another important tool in our efforts to support the government of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people in their fight to defend their country. I'm signing a bill that provides another important tool in our efforts to support the government of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people in their fight to defend their country.
Mr. John, previously I have talked to Mr. Hussein Askari, who is a member of the Belt and the Road Initiative in Sweden. He told me that the sanctions imposed on Russia is a suicidal policy that will harm European countries more than Russia itself. Do you agree with that?
Well, yes, we could see this now in UK. Obviously, the prices of coconut oil is going high to sky. The fuel for cars is going high to sky. The transport now, obviously, in order to bring food to the supermarket, you need to obviously lower the transport to lower the prices. Prices very, very high. They have basically shot themselves in the foot. You know, I don't think the crisis affected Russia more than, affecting us. We are actually having difficulties. Now, you could see Biden issuing billions of dollars to be sent to Ukraine. I think Biden should be looking after his own nation. A country obviously of hunger. Population who actually suffer from starvation, Americans who can't make it to hospitals because of the health service, education. He needs to close all these his immigration camps on the border of Mexico and torture of the refugees. And he's not qualified to worry about the Ukrainian civilians. I think he should look at his backyard first before he issue any support to the Ukrainians. Well, don't go even very far, Millions of his money go to the Zionist regime of Israel to kill Palestinians, daily. Why that, obviously, he had a heart for the Ukrainians, yet he actually part of killing Palestinians and occupying their lands. This is a hypocrite policy, which is the West always played this card. They cry for Ukraine, but they kill somewhere else. The slaughter in Syria. It's still killing in Syria till yesterday. There was bombing people in Syria. Yet he's so worried about the Ukrainians. It is a political game. The fear of Russia getting strong, fear of Russia role in Middle East, especially when 2015 Russia involved in Syria. If the president of Russia now was Yeltsin, I don't think we'll see this problem because that drunk man, was yes sir to Bill Clinton. Obviously, Putin is standing on a firm position in every aspect, saying, we are Russian, we have to defend our country, we have to face NATO, which is trying to encourage to the border of Russia, all the way to the Black Sea. So it is obviously an international political game.
Quite interesting points has been raised. Mr. Kirill, derived from John's word, and to what extent U.S. could keep its aid to Ukraine? Don't you think that U.S. policy is based on the idea of weakening the Russian economy and its military operation on the sake of Ukrainians?
I think that Biden writes yesterday the law of land lease because for American establishment and also for NATO maybe that if Russians have victory in Ukraine, there will be a catastrophe, maybe political or geopolitical catastrophe for NATO. So they will maybe sell to Ukraine hard weapons too much. They will sell the weapons and Ukraine wants. If it's in February, it started from some maybe weapons like Stinger, yes, like some NLAW systems, and now we see that there's and so plane fighters, yes, artillery, maybe tanks. So maybe every week the situation in France will be also be more rigid. So it is for Biden, maybe this conflict in Ukraine is like a conflict of between global West partners of Ukraine, yes, and Russia. So it's like an existential conflict. So I think Congress will vote for 33 billions for Ukraine. That's on this money they will sell to Ukraine all these weapons, and after this position, we see that Ukrainian diplomacy also have more rigid position, because 2 months ago Zelensky wants
Perfect.
Once only that the war stops
Thank you,
in
Mr.
the territory of February, and now our Minister of Foreign Affairs says that for Ukraine, victory is only when we have all Ukrainian territories, but by our control, included Crimea.
Thank you, Mr. Kerr. I'm sorry to cut your train of thoughts. Mr. John, Mr. Carroll, thank you so much for joining us in this debate. Really appreciate it. To this point, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. A special coverage will be held also tomorrow. So for now, have a blessed evening.